Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen.
And I'm Dennis Ward. It's now day 2 of Algonquin Anishinaabe Grand Chief Verna Polson living in a wigwam without food or water. Polson set it up outside the Indigenous people's space nearly 2 weeks ago and began living there.
The Algonquins want a 25% stake in the building with the other national Indigenous organizations. Our APTN's Amber Bernard was there today, and she's got an update as to why this woman escalated her actions.
On Canada Day, Grand Chief Verna Polson declared a hunger strike. She had gone just over 40 hours without food or water before a resolution was made. Polson wants the Algonquin Nation to be named an equal partner in the Indigenous people's space across from Parliament Hill.
I just was with her maybe about an hour ago. I went to speak with her. I've gone in a few times to check on her, and obviously she's weak. I mean, it's hot out here. It was hot yesterday, and not drinking water is having a huge impact, but physically she's weak, but mentally she's strong.
Polson was not speaking to the media today, but had warned earlier of escalating her demonstration if nothing happened. Since declaring her hunger strike on Canada Day, supporters rallied around the wigwam showing solidarity with Grand Chief Polson. Respected Algonquin elder Claudette Commanda kneeled during O Canada to show her support.
Did you see that? I took the knee in protest. In protest against God Save the Queen in Canada.
Prime Minister Trudeau gifted the Indigenous people's space to the Assembly of First Nations, Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, and Métis National Council in 2017. But it sits on unceded Algonquin territory, and the Algonquin Nation wants 25% of the space.
Now, from the get-go, we were left out. We were basically an afterthought in that whole process. We felt that it should have always been Canada, the Algonquin first. As you said, we're the rights and title holders of this land. We've never given it up. We don't have a treaty. Then the Assembly of First Nations, the Métis National Council, and the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami. That didn't take place.
However, there has been a recent and major development to this story. Carolyn Bennett's office reached a resolution with the Algonquin Nation in the past hour. While they couldn't discuss the specifics of that arrangement, they are happy an understanding has been made. We also learned that Grand Chief Verna Polson left her wigwam immediately after the resolution was made to seek medical attention. Amber Bernard, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The president of the Métis National Council has concerns with 3 self-government agreements signed in Ottawa last week. The presidents of the Métis organizations in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta signed the agreements with Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett on Thursday. For more, we spoke with the MNC President Clement Chartier earlier in the day. President Chartier, thanks for joining us. What are your concerns with the self-government agreements that were signed last week?
Well, my major concern, first of all, I have a responsibility to keep a national perspective on what happens within the Métis Nation. My major concern is that there's a possibility, and I say only a possibility, that each of the 3 governing members who signed these agreements can put forward their own definition of who is Métis in their constitutions. But of course, we did agree in 2002 to a common criteria, which is in each of their respective constitutions, at least in Saskatchewan and Alberta. The Métis Nation of Ontario, of course, is a different matter altogether because they really haven't been applying that criteria. They've been going based on their own definition of Métis. So basically, the issue is that they now are given the opportunity by the federal government to go with their own definition of Métis. And clearly enough, in their agreement, they do state that the Northwestern Ontario Regional Council is part of the historic Métis Nation, and they acknowledge the others aren't part of the historic Métis Nation. So at least they're upfront about that. And as we move forward, we'll see to what degree the Métis proper within the Métis Nation deviate from the definition that we currently have.
You questioned whether these agreements are now putting the Métis Nation, quote, in harm's way by potentially creating mini Métis nations. What did you mean by that?
Well, perhaps the answer is, I looked at the media, and the media themselves are saying the three Métis nations. So, it gives the misperception out in the public, including the media, who hopefully I thought should know better, that there was only one Métis nation, one Métis people. But they're saying there's all these three Métis nations. And what I'm saying again is, if each of those determine that they're going to define who are the Métis within their own provincial jurisdictions, then that's going to carve up the Métis nation even more carved up than we have been with the modern day provincial governments. We may see a situation where the Métis are dismembered through the Constitution, through Section 35. But I'm hopeful that it doesn't go there. And in the end, I believe the Métis in Saskatchewan and Alberta will stick with the national criteria. And if they do, then that doesn't become an issue.
Would it have made more sense for Minister Bennett to sign this agreement, these agreements with MNC rather than three different organizations?
Well, they tried with four. The Manitoba Métis Federation refused to go along with this version of agreements, mainly because of the definition, and also because it makes the inherent right that we possess contingent on reaching agreement. So we go from an inherent right of self-government now to a contingent right of self-government based on the ability to negotiate an agreement, self-government agreement with Canada, and Canada saying, yes, we agree that you are self-governing. So that's a big issue. And actually, you're right. For the past 3+ some years, I've been advocating with Minister Bennett that we have to take a national approach because there are national principles that are involved here, but that never has happened. And finally, last month, I was able to get on the agenda going forward, Section 35 rights table to deal with national principles, national issues. And it would have made more sense had we had those national principles, national issues up front of these specific negotiations. But in the end, based on these principles, each governing member does have the jurisdiction to deal with, what's taking place within their jurisdictions in terms of programs and services and so on, but not things such as who are the Métis. There is only one Métis nation, one Métis people, and that belongs to the national government to decide, and it was decided in 2002.
President Chartier, well, we have you. You're likely aware Grand Chief Verna Polson of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation Tribal Council has been on a hunger strike calling for equal partnership in 100 Wellington, the former embassy that is to become a national Indigenous center. What are your thoughts on what's taking place?
Well, first of all, I only found out about this hunger strike this morning from CBC. I've been away out of the country at meetings, and basically in our government we have ministers responsible for certain aspects, and our Minister of Social Development, Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand, is responsible for this file, so I will let him continue to try to work this out and see where it takes us.
President Chartier, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
Yes, thank you.
Sentencing for the man guilty of murdering Christine Wood began Tuesday. In May, a Winnipeg jury found Brett Overby guilty of second-degree murder in connection with the young Cree woman's death. Wood went missing from a Winnipeg hotel in August 2016. Her body was found 10 months later in a shallow grave outside the city. During the sentencing, Wood's family spoke of the impact of having their only daughter taken from them. Brittany Hobson has this.
Memories of Christine Wood played out in a courtroom this morning as the man found guilty of murdering her awaited his sentence. A jury found Brett Overby guilty of second-degree murder in May, which comes with a mandatory life sentence. Today, a judge determined he would be eligible for parole after 15 years. 9 family members shared their victim impact statements with the judge. Took the Crown about 45 minutes to read out all of them. While the Crown was doing this, Melinda Wood, Christine's mother, was seen crying and dabbing tears away from her eyes. She said in her victim impact statement that the pain has only grown stronger since her daughter's body was found. The 21-year-old went missing from a Winnipeg hotel in August 2016. Her body was found 10 months later in a shallow grave, rural property outside the city. Court had previously heard Wood had met Overby through an online dating site the same night she went missing. The two had met up for drinks at a local restaurant. Afterwards, they went back to his house to continue drinking. Overby testified in court that at one point Wood became violent and began to attack him. He said that he woke up to Wood lying in a pile of her own blood in his basement, and he couldn't remember what happened. During sentencing, the judge rejected evidence Overby felt threatened or violated by Wood that evening. Overby had briefly addressed the courtroom where he asked everyone to send prayers to the Wood family. The Crown was asking for parole ineligibility at 17 years while defense was asking for 12 years. Today, family addressed media at a press conference put on by Manitoba Kiwi-Tanawi Ogimaginak, and this is what they had to say.
I'd like to say I'm very appreciative of the outcome. You know, it's not going to bring our daughter back. It's not going to take away the pain. It'll always be there.
And while Melinda Wood didn't speak, her husband reflected on what they could have done.
She warned you about the drugs and when you moved to Winnipeg, about being careful who you trusted. Your mom wishes that she could have warned you about all these, about that website.
George Wood had this message for his daughter.
If there was something I could say to my daughter right now, I miss you. I wish this didn't happen to you. Many times I have spoken to you in my mind. If only I was there to protect you.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
An emotional press conference.
Yeah.
Well, the Senate has passed Bill C-83, and it happened just before it broke for the summer. It promises to fix issues surrounding solitary confinement. But when we come back after the break, one senator isn't so sure.
First, here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast.
Here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 28 with showers for Fredericton, sunny and 16 in St. John's. 7 is the high and sunny skies for Nain. 21 for Happy Valley Goose Bay. 31 for Montreal under sunny skies. 26 under the sun in Saguenay. A warm day in Toronto and Ottawa, 30 above. 29 with showers in Peterborough. 26 under sunny skies for Thunder Bay. 31 in Kapuskasing. 21 for Norway House, showers, and 20 for God's Lake. 12 with rain in Puckatawagan. A rainy high of 23 for Winnipeg. 24 in Princess Harbour and Barons River. In Saskatchewan, 22 under the sun for Regina and Yorkton. 21 in North Battleford. 18 with showers for Meadow Lake. 13 in rain for Stony Rapids. Welcome back. An indefinite stay in solitary confinement has been struck down by the British Columbia Court of Appeal. But before that happened, the Senate passed Bill C-83 just hours before it broke for the summer. It promises to fix the problem. Case closed. Not so fast, says Senator Kim Pate. She believes the law may not stand up to another legal challenge. And it didn't need to be that way if the Liberal government hadn't rejected Senate amendments. She joined us earlier from Ottawa. Senator Pate, good to see you. First off, what is wrong with allowing indefinite stays in solitary confinement?
Well, one of the things we know is that when solitary confinement and segregation were first introduced, they were seen as humane alternatives to beating people to killing people. And over the years, what we know is that what it actually produces is physical and mental, basically torture, what the United Nations has deemed amounts to torture. And so we know that isolating people, denying them access to people, other people, and human contact, denying them access to even physical ability to move around, and keeping them in those kinds of conditions actually causes physical and mental deterioration. So over the years, we now realize that what started out as something to be a more humane approach, in fact, is incredibly inhumane and damaging to people. And so really there's been an evolution of thinking, of understanding of that, and over the years a recommendation that in fact we work towards ending segregation. The inquest into the death of Ashley Smith, the young woman who died and what was deemed a homicide at the inquest, recommended we get rid of segregation altogether for people with mental health issues. The United Nations has said anything more than 14 days, 15 days is tantamount to torture. And so what we're seeing is an evolving understanding, and so it's time for courts to have oversight over this area, and also for us to work towards ending the practice entirely.
So, Senator, doesn't Bill C-83 change that, and will it prevent indefinite periods of solitary confinement?
Well, Bill C-83 is put forth as ending the use of segregation, but in fact what it does is rename segregation to call them structured intervention units instead of segregation units, and takes away some of the current procedural safeguards that exist. And in fact, two courts of appeal, BC and Ontario, have ruled there needs to be some caps on the use of any kind of solitary or confinement or segregation. And increasingly, there's a call for oversight, external and independent oversight. And at the Senate level, we made a recommendation that, in fact, after 48 hours, there should be judicial oversight. So courts should look at what's happening within the prison setting. And the reason for saying 48 hours is we know that there have been findings that as soon as a few hours after a cell door closes, and certainly within 48 hours, you can see irreversible, irreparable, permanent harm, psychological and physical harm to individuals because of isolation. And so it was basically, it's not saying right now, or the amendment that the Senate made that was rejected by the House of Commons wouldn't have ended it, but would have required courts to establish for now why someone should be kept in those conditions and to ensure that it's monitored by the courts.
Senator, we're short on time here, but Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale responded to the rejected Senate amendments by saying they would have tied up court resources. How do you respond to that?
I think, that's a useful argument for the government to put forward when they don't want to take action. This recommendation was actually made by Louise Arbour following the incidents at the prison for women that gave rise to the Commission of Inquiry she chaired. 23 years ago she made these recommendations. The court has, or the government has had ample time to consult with courts. And just recently, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that in bail cases, so in situations where people are being held awaiting trial, the court has to review those cases. And we're talking about tens of thousands of cases per year. Corrections themselves say that last year there were 5,000 people who were in segregation, or 5,000 entries into segregation over the period of a year. If we implemented judicial oversight, most of us know that automatically that would start to change the culture and we'd see fewer people in segregation. But more importantly, we would also see corrections actually start to move towards having to justify that, and we would only see a handful of cases, probably a month in each jurisdiction, as opposed to, hundreds or tens of thousands as we're seeing in terms of bail reviews. And so really, it's the last, prisons and our correctional system are the last system of the administration of justice to come under the courts in terms of being overseen by the courts, and I think it's high time that they were, and more importantly than me, people who have expertise in this area, judges and lawyers who have worked in this area for many and have expertise, have called for this for some time as well.
Senator, we'll have to leave it there. Always a pleasure. Appreciate you taking some time for us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing attention to this important issue.
It was the opportunity of a lifetime for a Cree teen at a Toronto Blue Jays game on the weekend.
That's still to come, but first, the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast. Here's the rest of Wednesday's weather forecast, picking back up in a soggy northern Alberta. 18 for Fort McMurray, 17 in High Level. A sunny day and 22 for Medicine Hat. Showers and 20 for Calgary. On the west coast, 23 under sunny skies for Campbell River. 29 in Kamloops. 21 in Dease Lake. Rain and 19 for Smithers. Showers and 20 for Fort Nelson. 25 in Beaver Creek. 23 for Dawson, Mayo, and Whitehorse. Showers and 22 for Fort Liard and Trout Lake. 23 under sunny skies in Norman Wells. 7 is the high with rain for Sax Harbor. 19 under the sun in Colville Lake. 14 and sunny for Repulse Bay. 16 under the sun for Cambridge Bay. 16 in showers in Baker Lake. 13 is the high in Igloolik. 10 for Arctic Bay.
Welcome back. The Stanley Cup has made its way to the small hamlet of Calahoo, Alberta. It's all thanks to hometown hero Craig Berube as interim coach for the St. Louis Blues. He led the team to their first ever Cup in franchise history. He is now the head coach. The Blues were also dead last in the NHL standings in January before clawing their way to the top 5 months later.
And Berube, not the only Indigenous connection on that Blues team. Hopefully we'll see when Jordan Nolan takes the cup to Garden River for the 3rd time. Meanwhile, an Indigenous teenager sang "O Canada" in Cree in front of thousands of baseball fans at Rogers Centre in Toronto on Saturday.
Oh Canada, Nikki Nani.
13-year-old Kia Bruno from Samson Cree Nation is in northern Alberta sang as part of the Blue Jays' celebration of National Indigenous Peoples Day. It was the first time the national anthem has been sung in Cree at the home of the Toronto Blue Jays, who faced off with the Kansas City Royals. The 13-year-old was selected from dozens of hopefuls, and as you're seeing there, 16-year-old Olivia Toolkate from Attawapiskat First Nation threw the first pitch. Super opportunity
That's
for
pretty
both
crazy.
of them.
Well, yeah, and to be 13 years old and to maintain that composure, you're the first person to sing it in Cree, and in front of that many people, a lot of pressure.
And a good pitch there, too. I've seen a lot of presidents who didn't even make it all the way, so that's pretty nice. That's your APTN National News for this Tuesday.
For the latest, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and download the app, APTN News. And I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.
I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. We'll leave you now with more O Canada and Cree. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Oh Canada, Nikki Nani Taskina, Kisaki Hetina, O Takawikia, Nite Hinak Kiwapamtinan, Soke Kiwetino, Bokoite Ota, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land. Lord,